Does that look good now? Okay. Skype, Zoom, Teams, WhatsApp. Oh my God, this is kind of we're living the problem of data, communications, and being bombarded in all different angles. So exactly. I think I have like 5 different images of Praba, this handsome guy in front of me, and now I've got to know which image am I looking at. Got too many monitors, that's all we do. But anyway, thanks very much for being patient, everyone. So that's actually kind of an interesting point. I mean, the fact is that there's so many different sources of data, right? In this case, we're talking about whether it's Zoom or Teams or Skype or some other, or Slack, and it all accumulates data, right? It all accumulates data, and that's what everyone says is, the goal. It is really just getting to the data. So think about it from this point of view. You got to Microsoft. What kind of projects were you working on initially? I know you mentioned to me at one point you were managing the Xbox imaging on artificial intelligence in the supply chain. Talk a little about that, because that's kind of, to me, was one of the first times we met a few years ago. Was fascinating looking at having data or having imaging objects, imaging devices, looking at your physical production and determining whether there was defects. Is that right? Did I get that right?
Right. So actually that's one of the key application of artificial intelligence in terms of how we can use the greatest algorithms, state-of-the-art algorithms that are available in computer vision to be able to detect at scale. So that's very important, right? So there are times that things that you cannot see to the human eyes that can be captured through these algorithms.
Right.
We can check for even the minute malfunction or defects in the product, and at scale, as I mentioned. So that's the beauty of it, and the cloud architecture that is available today, of course, that we use Microsoft Azure, and there are other cloud vendors like AWS and GCP. Everybody is doing great from that standpoint in terms of offering these services at scale.
Right. So one of the things that this is completely fairly random off topic, but I thought it was always relevant. And whenever I walked through an airport, when we used to walk through airports, and I used to travel an enormous amount, it was always amazing to me that we were not using some form of visual recognition. So, for example, I used to travel a lot. Now I don't travel as much. But when I'd walk through the airport, I was thinking, why is there no security device? Look, I've opted into the airport, right? I've kind of opted into the idea that I'm going to be in an airport. They probably are monitoring me. We want to have a safe environment. What do you think about that in terms of the use of that? You were talking about it from a device point of view, right? Looking at an Xbox or something. But what about from a human point of view? Much more complicated, I imagine.
Yeah, it is definitely much more complicated, but there is technology available today, and in fact, it's been evolving really fast. But this is a very interesting topic and a controversial one too, because when you use technology to identify the individuals, then there is the question of ethics and privacy and security. All those things come into a play. So that needs to be something managed or governed well, otherwise that it can get into the hands of people who want to misuse that and then be able to take advantage of that is the concern. In fact, there have been a lot of research in the University of Washington here in Seattle, and there are, I know at least 2 or 3 people who are in the leading research when it comes to facial recognition and identification. And they've been debating about even giving up their career on this because it can get into the hands of people who misuse that. So that's the big concern. But from a technology standpoint, today you have the capability to be able to personally identify an individual based on facial features and different things and coordinates and be able to detect that.
Right. No, it's fascinating. I mean, I remember back in the day in the 1990s, I was involved in medical information of the so-called medical informatics field. And one of the things people would tell me, and I'm the son of a father who was a doctor, and I used to walk into the hospital where he worked, into the operating room area. He was an anesthesiologist. And people would tell me things like, medical records are not secure. Well, if they're going into digital form. I thought, you've never been in a hospital. Because in hospitals certainly the 70s, 80s, and 90s, I mean, you could walk around, probably even, certainly less so today, medical records stacked up high. So people were always concerned about making it digital, but it was always much more insecure previously. So it's kind of, in some ways, a lot of this data challenge is not so much the practicality, but the politics, if you will, or as you're describing it, right?
Yeah. So if you look at the medical field, I think that's one of the industry that lacking in technology in terms of taking advantage of the nice things, the better things, the great things that are available today.
Right.
There have been a lot of focus in the recent past, especially that as we ramp up our technology, at the same time we got to parallelly invest in making the data secure, the information protected, and also there are new compliance rules and policies, and making sure that we go hand in hand.
Right.
So that everybody gets comfortable to be able to use them for the right reasons.
Right. So in the data field, in the health field, the challenges are often going to be heavily consumer facing. Right. Consumers are most concerned about people stealing their health information and the privacy issues, etc. But from a business point of view, maybe it's not as fearsome. Meaning, if we take it from a business, how do you help manage the business better through data science?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of opportunity in healthcare using data, machine learning, data science, and artificial intelligence. When I've been, as part of my job, I've been talking to many clinics in US and across the world too. If you look at their systems, they're all very discrete, and they're not connected to each other. They are still using piece of paper to write down the information to be transferred from one machine or one system to another systems, like between EMRs and EHRs.
Right.
And in fact, it's so funny that I was talking to one of the clinic last week. The technology advancement that they've been able to implement in the recent past is like moving away from the piece of paper to Excel. So that's what is the advancement. But I see a lot of opportunities in terms of automating this, connecting these systems together, of course, in a secure manner.
Right. So talk a little about, for people who are less familiar, obviously, in the field of, just describe the difference in the machine learning, artificial intelligence, data science. We're not going to put up a picture of this, but describe it in general terms so that someone who's new to the field can appreciate the nuances of various aspects of the field.
Yeah. So the terms like machine learning, artificial intelligence, and data science, like it's kind of used in different contexts based on who you talk to or which website that you look at. So in general, machine learning is something that it's a study of computer algorithms that improve the efficiency or the predictability, the performance automatically through experience, meaning that you look at the past data and you learn from the past data, the trends and behaviors and all those things, and then use that insight, use the knowledge to be able to predict or project what is going to be the future. So that's the machine learning part of that. In general, you can say it's a subset of an artificial intelligence. When you say artificial intelligence, it's like, of course, the term itself says that it is not a natural intelligence like the human intelligence that we all have. The idea is that using technology, using algorithms to be able to mimic what human being can do. It's something similar to like speech recognition or visual recognition. So those kind of things really fall into the artificial intelligence categories. And then if you look at data science, like you do anything with data, it kind of falls into the category of data science. So you could be a data analyst, you can be a machine learning engineer, you could build artificial intelligence applications. So it's kind of a broader term in my opinion, where you can do descriptive analytics, looking at the past data and explaining them, and then be able to tell what is going on, and then to see the predictive analytics so that you can predict what will happen from the data, and then to looking at prescriptive analytics, like you can even mandate or prescribe that what should happen. So So these are the different levels of the technologies that can help you. Again, the basics are all data. So if you have a good amount of data, then yes, definitely that you're going to get the best intelligence, best insight out of that, then be able to use them for the future.
I was talking with Dan Sullivan a few days ago on Meet the Gurus, and one of the things he was saying is that if you're looking for a job, in his case was in the cloud. I mean, what better way to do that than to go to the employer? Let's assume it's in the field of entertainment or healthcare or finance. Go to their field, find a big data set that relates to their field, and then create a GitHub repo with a project that you built around that data set. Obviously demonstrating. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. That's a right way to look at it. I also teach in one of the universities here in Northeastern campus here in Seattle. In fact, one of the students was working on figuring out how to get into this and how to impress their employers, potential employers. Was that she basically looked at the data from YouTube in terms of the different videos available for the particular industry, particular domain that their future employer is working on, then gain the insights from the number of videos, the playlist, and how many people are looking at the images or the videos, and then telling them what is the most favorite topic within that industry, and which area or which market these videos are watched. And
fascinating.
Those data is publicly available. Yes, of course, that you can't even for free. You can use certain amount of number of calls to this YouTube APIs, and then generated a nice a summary report, and then send it to them, to their employer, and actually there was not even an interview to get selected for that, the candidate. She got selected.
Oh my God, I would hire her if she could come back and tell me, for example, in the education field, what precisely. Maybe we should call her and ask her. What a brilliant way of looking at a problem. That's a really clever. It's providing a solution. It's kind of interesting. There are these things called challenge. The X Prize, the big prizes given out for challenges, and we're going to start doing those in January and February on our platform, offering prize money for solving interesting problems. And that seems to be, people want to solve real problems in business. They don't want to know that you have. Yes, certifications are great. Certifications demonstrate something, but being able to produce a result is even more exciting, I think, for most employers. If you were sitting at Microsoft or now at the Allen Institute, if someone walks in and said, "Hey, Praba, you're working on a healthcare thing. I don't know exactly what it is, but I was doing this thing on YouTube, and I was noticing that people are watching, I don't know, obviously COVID, but let's say they're watching also something related to coronary heart disease frequently, or something else." It'd be a fascinating set of insights. So it's kind of not only is that there's so much data available. I didn't know that, by the way, about YouTube. But then how do you begin to slice it or dice it or interpret it is really the kind of the top level of expertise, right? The core skills down here of the technical ability to understand how to use various algorithms and pipelines and all that sort of stuff builds up to help solving the business problem.
Yeah, so if you want to learn machine learning, I would say start with the foundational level things. It depends on what type of background that you have, and of course what type of passions that you have. There are various levels how you can contribute and then be very successful in this career. Is it all depends upon how deep you want to get into. You could write the algorithms. You can look at the previous ones. Either you can extend them, or you can come up with the new ones, better performance, and all those things. Or you could be simply a machine learning engineer or a scientist who uses them. It's basically an applied scientist in terms of applying those research that has been done, the algorithms that you have, to the problems that we see in the world, and how it can be applied to the specific domain that you are interested in. And again, you can go into a data analyst or a data engineer or a data scientist. So there are many ways that you can get into this based on, of course, your history and your experience and the passion that you have. But I would say start with foundations. If you want to be a machine learning engineer, data scientist, you should start with mathematics, especially linear algebra, calculus, statistics, and of course the programming language such as like Python and R. So I would say like start from there. Statistics is like very foundation based for many of this advanced algorithms that we see. Everything comes from the statistical analysis that we used to do in the past, right? And when it comes to the typical machine learning concepts, you look at like, you have models, you have features, you have the target annotations, labels, and how do you use that to train your algorithms, then be able to use that to predict. So those are some terminologies that you should get comfortable with. And from a different, again, there are different types of machine learning that are available. Predominantly, we use supervised machine learning. So you basically use the training data set, which has the annotations and labels, and then use that for regression or classification. Then the next major type is like unsupervised. Like you don't have much knowledge about what is available there. So you want to create some clusters of those data which are close to each other in different proximity levels. And then there are some, the combination of these two, semi-supervised and then reinforced, which are basically used in some self-driving cars and automobiles and things like that, which are in a much advanced different types of algorithms.
Interesting. Yeah, the compensation levels are very powerful. I mean, I'm just looking at the numbers here. The national average is $125,000 for the average base pay. So that's base pay, which is kind of extraordinary. And this is, I'm sure it varies by region and certainly by country. So average base pay is a very solid number. And as you said, there are many different areas. Whether it's I've even seen here data science intern, $112,000. Quantitative analyst, $95,000. Senior data scientist, $148,000. And I'm sure as you get more and more senior. So this is an attractive field, and it seems like there's basically an unlimited number of angles you can take it, right? So you can get deep into the weeds of the algorithms and writing the code, and you can also be a strategist, helping think through the problem and work with the scientists or the data scientists on building the platform of the systems.
Yeah, so it's a different levels that you can engage, and everybody is using data today. So we are much more online than ever before. Now, of course, that trend was growing, but now with the recent the situations that we have with the COVID and all, there are more businesses relying on their online traffic and online commerce than ever before, wherever they could. So there are a lot of competition, and the biggest problem in the online business is that customer loyalty is very low. So basically that, they keep switching from one platform to another platform or one vendor to another vendor, because it's very easy to do it, because I want to do my shopping or whatever I want to do sitting at my home. Switching from one company or one business to another business is just a different website or a different app. So one of the key things that we want to do from a customer standpoint is that every business is focusing on how do they understand their customers much better than ever before, so that they can personalize their experience, personalize the product, even target the advertisement, so that it's much more specific to the user or the customers that we have. And the thing is that I can throw in you go to any websites, any apps, there are hundreds of ads that you see, and I'm sure that you don't even pay any attention. You're just waiting for the ads to move out so that you can see the content that you are interested in. So how do you convert that ad to more appropriate, more useful, so that you get the traction from the customer and you keep the customers with you and retain them? So understanding customers is the biggest focus area for every business to be successful today. And of course, the data is very much behind all of that.
It's kind of funny you say customers, because obviously they can just you can swap the word patient, you can swap the word, in our case, student. One of the things we say, it's just kind of shocking to me, if you look at some of the biggest platforms out there, and I won't mention their names, but if you look at the biggest platforms out there, none of them ask the simplest of questions, which a instructor, as you, a professor, a teacher, someone who's in a class will ask something like, oh, okay, everyone, what's your background? Why are you in this class? Oh, boy, today's session is going to be 2 hours. Can you stay the whole time? Obviously, they wouldn't say that, but that's the presumption. So if you come online and you have no idea who the person is, why they're there. Like, for example, it's a big difference if I'm studying because I got to pass an exam and I'm studying because I'm changing my career. What I learn and how I'm focused on learning is quite different. So the same is true, and as you said, the customer. Who is the customer? For us, it's students. For you in your health venture, it could be doctors, it could be clinicians of all sorts, it could be other clinicians, it could be the patient, it could be administrators in a hospital. Knowing what they need and knowing what they're looking for is kind of the special sauce, right?
Yeah, so the understanding the customer or a patient or a student, in the past that we relied on asking them direct questions in terms of like, okay, what's your experience? What did you like? What did you not like?
Right.
And the answers are very, you can't completely rely on them. It's a situational based on what their current thinking or the mood, but they may not really tell you their real interest and real behavior. So I think you have the opportunity today in terms of tracking, like, if you are throwing instruction videos, and that should tell you that how many people are watching it and how far they are watching it, and you should be able to track it. Of course, not their personal information that can identify them, but at the same time, their behavior can be tracked, and that would give you the much more insight than asking them like, hey, did you like this video? Or like, do you want something else? Sometimes customers may not know what they want, but their behavior will tell you, and we have the ability to know that from the data.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, kind of interesting apropos of this, we're sort of in the process of a discussion with the University of Pennsylvania, where I went to school, particularly Wharton School, where they have an initiative, fantastic initiative, with their psychology department, which is a fantastic at Penn, called Behavior Change for Good. And actually, as I say somewhat comically, I always find that Zuckerberg has been one of the founders of that, and he's not notably considered one of the people, although he has done very great things, as the Behavior Change for Good with Facebook. But when you look at Behavior Change for Good, a lot of it in that case was looking at what do they call massive scale A/B testing, using behavioral economists and super smart people to determine, okay, if someone does this, what does that mean versus this? And obviously, as you're saying, sometimes what someone says they mean to do is not really what they meant to do. Right, or so what they tell you is not necessarily right. It's like what do we learn about these polls? We learned about the polls in the last election are basically meaningless. Whatever polling tools they're using, I mean, it seems to be they're completely inaccurate. And so they're obviously they're mostly every one of these polls is kind of like, think about that for a second. The area for polling is ready to be disrupted, because they're clearly not using artificial intelligence. They're clearly using people answering a cell phone or a home phone call and saying, Praba, do you like the way this country's going? Or are we on the right path, wrong path? Well, you may think we're on the totally wrong path, but you say, oh, it's pretty good. So how do you begin to look at the data science of something like that, for example? I'm not asking you to specifically answer the polling question, but it is a problem, right? Taking people's words versus their actions.
Exactly. I think the actions can be tracked, and again, I want to stress the point that everybody is doing that. If you are online, you are being tracked, and of course, there are major players who make sure that they are not tracking your personally identified information, because that's going to be the secret to the success of any companies, to be able to assure your customers that you're not spying on them, but at the same time you are interested in their behavior. So anybody wants to be successful, and I think they got to make sure that they are ethically in compliance and following all the policies, and that's another interesting area ethics and the honesty and in data science is another major area of focus. While we are building our skills, capabilities using technologies in favor of using for our success, but at the same time, data compliance and privacy, security, and compliance is a very interesting topic in this field as well.
Yeah, I mean, we have Dave Langer, who you have introduced to us, and now is doing some courses coming up. He's doing a Meet the Gurus next month. Is always talking about. He used to work for you at Microsoft, but talk about visualization, understanding what this data is, because everyone's surrounded by it, but frankly, interpreting it and presenting it is really kind of, for lack of a better word, the special sauce, the unique skill set.
Yeah, so data visualization is a very important focus area when it comes to data analysis, right? So me being a data scientist or a data engineer, I can see the trends, I can see the patterns and behaviors, I can see the origin of this data and what transformation happened to it and where it is going and how I can use it to predict the future. But if I want to go and convince my, let's say if I'm working in a corporate and I want to go convince my senior management, or even to go in front of my customers and then be able to tell a story around it, I should be really, really good in how I can project this data through some visualization, because not everybody is going to see what you have already seen, or they may not even have the time or the skills to understand all the things that I talked about, how I gain the knowledge about this data. Mm-hmm. But in a given very short time, and if you need to convince your audience, visualization is the key. And there are many techniques that are available today. If you take open source languages like Python and R, and there are some other tools that are available, gives you an amazing 3D views and even interactive. So kind of the capabilities are there from a technology standpoint to be able to tell a story about your data very easily.
I was just going to, there's a very well-known man, Edward Tufte, which everyone has heard of probably, is just a statistician and professor at Yale of computer science. But back in the day, I say back in the day, he's 78 years old now, but back in the day, he was talking about visualizing information, right? And I remember when I first got into the publishing information technology world in the early 1990s, it was like, he had books, right? No one else had anything but a book on it. But now there's so many different ways of looking at how you present something. And it obviously not only is important how you present it, but to whom you're presenting it, right? Presenting information to a child or to a teenager or to a senior is quite different in terms of, you have to understand some of the context that they come from, right? So it's not just take the data, present it, hey, this is a great chart, it looks really interesting, but to be familiar to the audience, right?
Absolutely. I think one of the greatest example, being displayed from very early days, is that if you go to online, you can search for this. It's called Napoleon's Retreat from Moscow. So that's a graph that is very popularly used in terms of telling the story in just one frame with a multi-dimensional information that you could get. The entire story of the Napoleon's army's march towards Russia and then the retreat, on how it can be portrayed in a single picture, single image, is the power of visualization. That you can write lines and lines of story about. You can even write books, but you may not be able to understand everything in just one picture. So visualization is very important.
Well, it's actually kind of, I think, is this the one you're referring to where there's time sequence? And you see
Yeah, it's time sequence in terms of from their origin, how many people started, and when they marched towards Moscow, in terms of what kind of issues they faced, and how many departed from their group, and how many died to illnesses, and how many turned back, and how many branched out and then joined later. So all these things can be seen in just one picture.
Yeah, and one of the things that I just reminded myself of, I used to be in the investment banking field in the 90s and before, and it was like, he who controls the documents controls the deal. Well, he who controls the data controls its interpretation, right? So if I tell you, so it's one of those things. It's sort of a moral question, also how to present information in a way that's both accurate and comprehensive, and at the same time not skewed to your point of view, right? If I show you a stock market curve of a stock that goes like this and then up here, and I'm starting the data point over there, you're looking at this great story, but it might have been a very volatile story, right? So in presenting data, it's kind of, you really, but it's one thing to sell the goods, as they say, to convince someone of your point of view. But if you're going to tell a whole picture, that point of view might be very skewed if you don't present the data in a sort of holistic fashion, if you know what I mean. In other words, when you present that data from the bottom to the top, you're thinking it's never going to go down, but maybe it just came crashing, like when the automobile sector in the 2008 crisis occurred. Everything was going like this, and it suddenly took off, but it was coming from a very bad crash.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So the interpretation is really important. What do you recommend? One of the last things I wanted to just ask you, what do you recommend for someone who's, let's say they're in the business field and they understand the compensation opportunities, they understand the career longevity, because it pretty much is unending. How do you suggest for someone from a business point of view? You talk about statistics and some of the mathematical things they have to learn. Can you jump into this field without having that? Can you have more of a business-focused approach? Let's say you understand how to generate, to interpret data. Is that a sufficient metric for entering the field?
Definitely, I think the most important thing that I would tell my team is that it's not about the technical skills. If you really want to be successful in any domain, you need to understand the domain. You need to understand the industry very well, whether it is a healthcare or insurance or automobile or finance or education, whatever that is, you need to understand your customers, your market opportunities, and the products that are available, the features that are important, and how the data travels from one system to another systems, and what kind of transformation that happens. So that is also very, very important, as much as the algorithms and the technology and the statistics that you want to learn. So the combination of these two is the one which is going to be powerful. Very rarely that everybody has all the skills that we need. So it's a teamwork, it's a group work, where you have somebody who is very strong in technology, and someone else is very strong in the domain. So they complement each other. So in the process, of course, that you get to learn on the other side, but you are very strong in one area, but at the same time you are relying on your partner, your teammates for the other things. So definitely that there are opportunities, people who are just beginning, but they are business savvy, who understand the business very well, and they have a very big role to contribute in any of these initiatives.
Yeah, what's one of the things when we first got into the technology element of training, we used to do finance training exclusively. We started to do training for some of the biggest banks and offshore technology companies in the domain, because one of the largest companies in Asia said to us they wanted to have their tech people to become so-called business techno-functional analysts. So they need to be able to understand what the client wanted. It's one thing to build something, but I have no idea what you want and no idea what your business is all about. I'm not sure I'm going to build something that's very successful for you.
Right, absolutely. In fact, even the current product that I'm working on, I do not have much experience on the domain. So basically, I'm hiring healthcare professionals to work with me to be able to teach me and my team in terms of what are the opportunities and the processes and how we do certain things. It definitely comes from them. And of course, they need to be data savvy too. So that we can work frequency matches to a level that where we can work together.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. There's so many opportunities. Appreciate your time, Praba, and thanks for doing this. And we'll see you with the next one.
Absolutely, I enjoyed talking to you, Paul. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.